didn't get to cover this last week mainly because dumbass over here forgot to watch it. But we had a pretty full show anyway, so it's probably better. Rick Hahn last week went on MLB Network and was interviewed by
Brian Kenny. I forget the name of his show. It's usually a stats show, but
he took 5 minutes and 33 seconds to be exact to interview Rick Hahn and ask him basically what the fuck happened was really what it was about. And they
I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember any interviews of any type with Rick Hahn since he was relieved of his duties. I don't know that he's spoken to the media at all.
I agree with you. This is first. There was I think him and Kenny both issued statements, and that was it.
Yeah, cordial boilerplate, nothing revealing. But he really got into what was happening, what his failures and everything else. And it's amazing because it's all stuff that you and I were talking about at the time, and it's pretty clear what was going on.
Yeah, so I pulled out some key highlights and quotes and stuff like that.
Nice.
One thing I just want to open with, it was very clear that, it was very clear after listening to him that him and Kenny were fired because they were a team. And he pretty much expressed that at the beginning of the interview that he made a comment. I can't remember who it was. Someone on MLB Network made a comment. I think it was about a GM needs to do these 10 things. And he said, not any GM is good at all 10 things.
That was really, it was 14 things that somebody had listed.
That's it. 14 things. And he said,
no one's capable of being great at all 14 was his point. And I like that.
So he said, you have people you lean on in the organization to pick up your inadequacies. And he's like, I'd like to think that when we won the World Series, I helped Kenny with that when he was GM, blah, blah, blah. But the first thing they get into is La Russa. And Kenny asked Rick if...
Oh, Brian Kenny.
Brian Kenny, yeah.
It's a little confusing.
I'll just say Brian. Brian asked Rick if he had unilateral decision-making, and he kind of tiptoed around that for a second. He said, well, on bigger things, obviously it was a consensus, but on other things, I did have, unilateral ability. And then they got into La Russa, and he says, it was not my unilateral decision. It was a consensus. And he had a little smirk on his face when he said it.
That's a pretty obvious one that, everyone speculated time. It looked like, when that introductory press conference came about, it looked like Rick Hahn was about to throw up.
He looked seriously like someone had passed.
Or I think at the time I mentioned, it looked like he was in a hostage crisis video. Like they're forcing him to read a statement against his will. So that one was pretty obvious. It was the way he worded it. It was, at least in this interview, it was pretty obvious that we were all correct.
Yes.
This was not Rick Hahn's decision. That was a pretty obvious one. He did a nice job of not throwing anyone directly under the bus.
Maybe you should add a little chime and a check mark. Our belief that Rick Hahn did not want Tony La Russa as manager has been confirmed.
Ding, 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 ding.
Check. I kind of remember the hostage crisis. That's pretty funny. I'm very excited today to present the new manager of the Chicago White Sox, Tony La Russa.
Oh, you remember at the time they had graphics that leaked that had AJ Hinch's name, like his signature in the background.
I know. What a difference that would have made as we're seeing in D-Trois.
Thank you once again, White Sox. You have paved the way for Tigers' greatness, in addition to giving us your great broadcaster, Jason Benetti. Thank you.
Then they transitioned into 2016, the turning point, the rebuild starting. And Rick kind of shared a funny little story when he had hosted the interview. I forgot that season. They started out 23-10. Mainly, as he pointed out, because the team was playing well above their means, and Matt Latos, who they had gotten off the scrap heap from San Diego, I think it was, he had something insane, sub 1.5 ERA in the first like 5 starts. And he even says, he's like, so the wheels begin to come off and the season turns.
The way he worded it, he didn't mean it this way, but I felt like he blamed the whole demise of his career on Matt Latos. So it was like wheels came off because of Matt Latos.
If Matt Latos had just performed as he should have, shitty, none of this would have happened. We would have been able to start the rebuild even sooner, like in April. But he talks about the famous interview where we took his favorite quote, mired in mediocrity. And he told what I thought was a funny story, that Scott Reifert, the head of PR, literally called him out and said, "Why did you have to use alliteration?" And Rick said, "What do you mean?"
Yeah, he didn't know he even said it, but it was such a perfect quote that idiots like you and I could jump upon and use for decades to come.
Yeah, he said, all anyone's going to remember from the entire interview is mired in mediocrity. And that's all anyone did remember.
You're correct. Ding, 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 ding.
We were right again. He also talked about something we talked about forever with the White Sox, and we've talked about it with the Giants too, that, after 2005, they had success. 2006, which I agree with them, was a better team on paper. And the AL Central is completely hot that year. I mean, the Sox won 90 games and didn't make the playoffs. And playoffs hadn't expanded at that point to what they are today. So, in the new format, they would have made it. But they kind of petered out at the end and didn't make it. And then 2008, they again won, made the playoffs. And they had enough success to where they made a mistake of not looking future forward and kept doing short-term gaps to
and that was the story of the Sox for 100 years at that point.
Right. And they lost sight of it, and everything culminated in 2016. So they do the rebuild. Again, just hearing him say it, I know we do a podcast that, whatever, for fun. We do a podcast for fun, but it is nice to hear.
Certainly not for money.
Yeah, definitely not for money. It costs us to do this podcast, folks.
It's true. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. But to hear things you and I talked about and said from the XGM of the White Sox, it's kind of nice.
It kind of validated everything we were talking about at that time. We knew exactly what was happening and whether they would say it or not at the time. So it's very, very validating.
Now, this next part I'm going to cover is probably going to be Smitty's favorite portion, because this is a debate we had about paying players based on projections versus performance. And he talks about, Brian Kinney asks Rick about, you win 93 games in 21. What happened after that? What happened with your team? Of course, Rick goes on and points out, we made the playoffs in 22.
Yeah.
Good or bad. Maybe it was bad that we made the playoffs that year because it kind of hyped up expectations prematurely. But Rick, very honest response. We obviously overestimated in our players' growth. We took some bets on some young players that would grow into the projections that boxed us in from a payroll standpoint. And those are like the Mikata contract. In fact, we could probably name that entire... and everyone
knows.
Yeah. So
and that was my argument at the time. What does this gain you to lock these guys up before they've done anything? And what the risk involved seemed to far outweigh the reward, which is exactly what happened. And it's and he recognizes it and put it far more succinctly than I ever did. But I was right. I'll take the victory lap here. I think we knew that long ago, but to hear Rick Hahn say the exact same things is kind of amazing.
I think he said it perfectly too. He said we took a bet, and it's true. Yeah. You're taking a bet. You're looking at these projections that all these brainiacs have done, all the sabermetrics, the trend. of a player with what their ceiling is. And he said, well, fuck, I'm not going to have enough payroll to sign these guys when they all hit their ceiling. So I'm going to get them into these player friendly contracts now, unless they're never on the field injured. Yeah.
Or and when they're on the field, unmotivated after getting a ton of money.
Yeah, that too. Whatever it is. I mean, could
I
be
call
anything.
All of that at the time the wrath of Hahn. Everything he touched turned to shit somehow. I think it was a bad strategy, but he had a lot of bad luck involved with that too, which the bet clearly did not pay off.
And the biggest indictment comes as he talks about the huge fall off really happened because the White Sox clubhouse culture changed. Mm-hmm. And they went from a winning culture to, he didn't really define what the culture had. He just said it changed and it moved away from a winning culture, and the clubhouse kind of turned into a mess.
He's certainly not going to use derogatory terms or point fingers at that point, especially in a 5-minute interview. But that's probably the key to it. Like what changed in that locker room and how it affected everything going forward. I think it's clear. If he wanted to, he could say we hired the wrong fucking manager and fell apart from there. So
twice.
Yeah. Exactly. It's
back to back.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing. We said it was a 5-minute and 33 second interview. It felt rushed. I was annoyed watching it because Brian Kenny had to kept cutting him off, but you got so much content in that tiny interview. I am dying for a long form sit down interview, maybe even a written piece, just to let everything come out. Because Rick Hahn didn't hold back. He wasn't being rude or derogatory, but he didn't withhold information.
Right.
In that interview. So I'd be fascinated, even a 20-minute interview, how that would look. So I think there might be more coming from Rick Hahn, as this is the first time he's stepped out into the public. I don't know why he's talking now. I don't know if that was discussed. Is he potentially looking to get back into baseball? Like, what is he getting his name and face back out there? I don't know. I don't know what all that's about, but it's going to be interesting to follow at least.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. I don't understand the timing of the interview it sounded like Brian Kinney had asked him on the show, and
is this the first person that asked him to be on their show? Like, what?
I guess maybe
just enough time has passed and now he's ready to talk, or who knows?
Yeah.
Wordhole Media.